Hey Rob, how's it going?
Hey, how are you? Yeah, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great. Just really excited to have you on. We just have a lot of like excitement around building loyalty programs that kind of punch above their weight. And having you on, who's run one of the largest loyalty programs, I think it's just gonna be such a treat. So why don't we get right into it? Rob, why don't you just start with your background and who Rob is?
Yeah, I'll give you kind of a 90-second overview. I have about 20 years, 15, 20 years in the industry of technology and marketing. Worked at a software company years ago out of college and learned kind of the customer facing side. But 10 years ago, moved to Bloomin' Brands. It's a parent company of Outback Steakhouse, Carrabba's, Bonefish, and Fleming Steakhouse. And I had multiple different roles there. So I had to learn the ins and outs of the customer, understanding the voice of the customer from our social marketing media side to the brand development side, working with Bonefish. And then lastly, my one of my bigger roles was the loyalty program manager, and that was our loyalty program over all four brands. So four unique different brands that some people may or may not know were under one umbrella, but one loyalty program, which is kind of unique for some loyalty programs. It's based usually on one company or one brand, but we wanted to bring that all together as its own brand and give incentives to the customer to continue to visit again and build that loyalty. So I did that for quite some time. Got a lot of learnings, good and bad, on what you can do, positives and negatives of it, and obviously the building of it and understand the customer is kind of the key learnings for this. We know what they do, we know what they like, and that way we can offer better things for them to come in or to buy your product more.
Awesome. Programs of that size, I think you get to benefit a lot just from just the scale, right? So just curious, because I know that BBI and Outback, I know that there's very thoughtful decisions that go into kind of everything. What's the reason for the loyalty program? Like what would be the one, two, three reasons on why Outback has a loyalty program?
Yeah, and if you look around the restaurant landscape, it's a big thing, especially recently. In the past, you could really see in the past 6, 12 years, if they haven't had one, they're launching one now. If they have had one, they're tweaking it and changing it to fit the better needs of the customer. And the reasons we did that was to understand, one was to really understand the transactions of the customer more. Since we can see that payment data for a restaurant, and sometimes it's harder, especially Outback being a legacy brand, really couldn't pinpoint exactly who was what, who was spending how much incremental were they spending based on a coupon that they get in the newspaper, or some sort of social thing online that they would just kind of show and bring in. We really wanted to track and see that spend on top, when we did offer an incentive, to see what actually worked, what was really driving people in, what was making them spend more. So the transaction data was really most important to have that, eventually like a CDP, a customer data platform, to understand what everyone is doing. Outside of our email list, which is millions and millions of people, we really wanted that core group and understand what they were doing. And then obviously second is driving loyalty. Is we know people love Outback, we know people love Carrabba's and Bonefish. They may or may not be part of the loyalty program, but if they're still very loyal to the brand, so we want to bring them in as well. What's going to offer them incentives to come into the loyalty program, even though they might be loyal to the brand for years and years and years. So continue to build that loyalty, fill the bucket of our loyalty program. And then also, at the end of the day, for restaurant companies, drive traffic. If we're not driving traffic with these loyalty groups and they're not coming in more, they're not coming more often, they're not spending more, it's not really doing anything. And you might just be discounting too much, where you get to a bad snowball where it just continues and continues and continues to discount. So we really want to fill the loyalty bucket, drive loyalty, understand the transactions, and then, for us, drive traffic and sales.
Amazing. And I think that's a very clear way of looking at it. So how did it go in terms of filling the bucket? Like, were you able to get people to sign up right away? Were there things that worked to get lots of signups? Did you have to like
Yeah.
iterate on that? What was that bucket like?
Yeah, so the story of the Dine Rewards program at Bloomin' Brands was years in the making. So back, I think 2016, before I was even that role, but I was part of that department. I saw it's from its infancy of testing different loyalty programs, a points based, a visit based, in different markets to really see what was driving people to sign up and to use it. So years later, a year later or so, once we figured out that it was visits at that time, come 3 times, the fourth one you get 50% off. We rolled that out nationwide. So that went for a couple years, and it was really driving a lot of loyalty. And then it was continuing to drive that bucket and drive that value message. What is it in it for me? Why should I spend this time to sign up? Sometimes it could be clunky to sign up, and you want to get that past that hurdle. So that's also one key piece on the sign up is make it easy and make it worthwhile. So that took different tweaks and just learnings for over the past 8-10 years of the program. But later in our stages, we realized the customer who didn't come as often wasn't getting anything. So there's a huge bucket of people, 80%, that were coming 1 or 2 times a year, which is normal, but they weren't receiving any incentive. So we transitioned to points to give more to the 80% who was part of our program but not getting anything, and still offer a lot more to our very loyal of our 20% who came in 4, 5, 6, 7 times a year. So eventually we wanted to try to make tiers. We wanted to offer more if you spent more. So that's where points came involved. And I think you see that around the marketplace a lot. Chipotle, things like that, Starbucks, where you build points based on your spend. So once we were able to get more people into the program and that could use it more often and get incentivized more often, so the bucket became easier to fill. But it's always a continuous challenge because you're going to have some people fall off. It's just natural. But you want to be ahead of that delta at all times to continue to fill that bucket and ultimately drive people to different stages of loyalty. And we had 9 stages that I could walk through. But we really wanted to get them in first, and then we could kind of see where they left as the life cycle of the customer.
Amazing. I think this is just such gold in terms of insights and information. So what I'm hearing is make it really easy to sign up. Obviously that's kind of like, remove that friction. So that's really important. And the second piece, what I'm hearing is you got to make sure that there's benefits for a wide set of your audience, right? It can't just be, a bunch of benefits for one core group because you're kind of forgetting the others. It sounds like that was the big learning. And, I think it makes a lot of sense now why you have points and tiers, right? And maybe just kind of like to double click on the tiers part of it. How many tiers did you ultimately start with and ultimately get to? And how does that map to the 9 stages that you kind of have internally or had internally?
Yeah, so we never actually got to, since it was so large and we were so ingrained, the tiers was still in planning process by the time I left the company recently. So I don't think they're there yet, but there is a behind the scenes tiers essentially. It just wasn't as visible to the customer, which was still impactful. So essentially, based on how much you spent, how often you came, you'd fall into our RFM model, our recency, frequency, and monetary. So working with some very smart data people, but you can also just do this based on kind of knowledge of your own customer. There's generally sets of buckets based on who your loyalty customers. Do they come in a ton? Are they spending a lot? Are they spending a lot but only coming about a little bit? So you can kind of just section them off into 4 tiers or groups as well. We had 9 based on time they came, how much they spent, and how long they were a customer. And we went after those customers differently because we knew if they went all the time and spent a lot, a $5 incentive might not be very incentive for them. Mm-hmm. But the new people who only came once in a while, that might get them, out of their seats and into the restaurant. So we would email different of these RFM model groups, different incentivized coupons to come in. Or if we knew they were going a lot and they were spending a lot anyway, we might not even offer them anything. It would just be a communication message. We saw that you came in and got the fish last week. Here's our new offering for this new shrimp dish. Even just recognizing that they came in and speaking to them a little more independent would drive them in as well. So it's really understanding those tiers in the background and changing your messaging, because marketing, especially should be for everyone. It's not one email blast to your entire database is really not going to be impactful. It's going to cost you more money most likely. Or you could do 3, 4, 5, even 2, based on different tiers and what you want to message and who these people are.
That's really interesting. And, it's funny because some brands will have their tiers kind of publicly published, then they kind of like formally have tiers, and others will have kind of like them behind the scenes, and you kind of just see the tier you're in type of thing. So it sounds like where Outback has landed is kind of the latter, but it works, right? I mean, it doesn't just work from a knowing where they fit, but also being able to send that personalization, those messages very personalized to them. And it sounds like that really drove behavior. And that the interesting thing about personalized messages like that drive behaviors, that's not costing you any money. You're not giving them a monetary reward there. You're just using the data you have to your advantage. Was that kind of like a surprise, or was that kind of like embedded in the plan?
Yeah, no, it's something we call it test and learns. So we always wanted to just think of an idea. What would make sense if I was in this group's shoes? I come 3 times a year, but I'm spending a lot of money. So maybe I like to go out for birthdays. So talk to them and kind of do a little investigation, but it might be more of an occasion based, or someone was spending a little bit less on average, but they're coming every other week. Maybe they're a business person. So just kind of have that idea and come up with a kind of hypothesis. And then you would throw out maybe 2 different emails to that group, control and one that was a little bit different, and just rank them, see what did better. So we would throw out controls of either a small offer or none with some language. And then we'd throw out an offer of 5% and an offer of maybe $5 and see what was better. And a lot of times, even though our dollar offs were for some groups very high, it was even for our loyal groups, the dollar offs weren't as high. They're going to be going anyway. So it was nice, I think, but they wanted a more experience and a reason to come in. And we began to offer some merchandise. We began to offer reservations ahead of time. We get exclusive sneak peeks of our new dishes, secret drinks that only they could order. It was these things that were above the monetary that they were really, reacting to, that we wanted to do a lot more of. And eventually connecting with, movie theaters and other things to do these experiences to these groups that they wanted really the next extra piece that would make their visit next level, other than just, a $10 off.
I love hearing this because, I mean, I think about us as we know that the $5 off, the 10%, the discount stuff for sure has a role, right? But there are other ways to kind of move the needle when it comes to engagement. And even, we talked about personalized messages, like that works. And then there's a whole kind of suite of other things you can do. And you started listing some of them, like early access to menu items that are not yet out, affiliated benefits from maybe a movie theater. So I'm just curious, if you park the monetary rewards or just the points aside, how did those other benefits how did you track those other benefits, and how well did those other benefits work?
Yeah, outside of dollars off, things like that. Yeah. So we would since they were already in our RFM bucket, so we knew this past rolling 30 days, they've gone X amount of times to be in this bucket or spent X amount of as much. If they came in, a little bit more or spent a little bit more than they would have on average in that bucket, we would say that would be a little bit incremental. Now, it could take some time. So we'd have to do a look back over 90 days, usually, if the offer expired or it was something else that wasn't driving traffic this weekend. You have to kind of keep an eye on that and take a snapshot. Like, this is where they were when we offered this in November. Let's come back in January once that's expired or the offer is no longer allowed, to go back and see, did they go an extra visit than that group normally would have on average, or did it not really do anything? Then we kind of put that aside and say, let's revisit that, or it might be better for a different group. And a lot of these we would look at and also tweak, our sign-up offer too. So fill in the bucket was also, there has to be some sort of incentive, most likely. And we started with some dollar offs, percents. We also started testing there, and you can use some learnings from your core group already to see what really registers, to also test on your sign-up offer, because these are potentially loyal people and they're in the same boat. They just never went through the process and signed up.
What worked the best in terms of getting people like the hook to sign them up?
So we continued with, we had a $10 for bonefish for quite some time, but other way around. We did have our number one dish was our bang bang shrimp. that sign up offer was by far the best because it was a loyal product. It was the number one product at Bonefish Grill. And then same with Outback, the bloomin' onion, the free bloomin' onion. Even though technically it's the dollar value, marketing it as that number one dish that everyone knows and they sometimes just go in the restaurant for was really the key sign up that we found. Even more than dollars that would you could buy whatever you wanted for 15. But if we talked about the Bang Bang Shrimp, more people would go in for that, even
Wow.
though a $15 could still buy it. Just that messaging and that picture of saying this is free would drive the best because it registers with people. Oh, that looks great. I'll come in. I got my appetizer paid for, and we'll go and get some drinks and some apps anyway.
That's really interesting, right? Because in one scenario, you're offering more money than what would cost you to buy the dish, and you're getting less signups than giving them the amount of money and but then marketing it around the dish. I think there's something interesting there. I think that the reason why loyalty works so well is because there's an affinity to the brand and the products. So right, so rather than so leveraging that and using that as the hook, obviously is going to work better than just hey, here's money, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's more, and it's also nicer to look at. Obviously, it's harder to, you can put a big 10 and dollar sign, but a picture and something that resonates, or even a video, and then you can use that in different places in social. You can do it on paid social, and it's easier to trigger with that image, some quick copy than really talking about dollars. Do I have to spend enough? How much do I have to spend to get it? What is allowed? Alcohol, no alcohol? Like there's less confusion. You're getting this really cool huge plate of Bang Bang Shrimp. And there's a lot more to offer if you come in from there.
It sounds like it is a little bit of an art form, right? To be able to curate a program such that the initial offering just to join is enticing enough, and then there's um, additional offers that kind of move you through, whether they're public tiers or kind of like tiers behind the scenes. And I think that iterating and just like testing your way through that obviously is a great way of doing that. I guess my big question is like, did all that kind of work at the end? It sounds like it did, but from a just looking back at it, did the testing yield like a very successful program that way?
Yeah, yeah, and our goal was to continue engagement. So we wanted to increase our engagement from the prior year. So someone in our loyalty program as a loyalty member making a transaction engagement in 12 months in a rolling 12-month period. So we wanted a 20% increase. So we had a little tracker of
Yeah.
essentially 120%. Where were we? And immediately sign up offers helped because that would create the first transaction. And then people who are already in it testing out and sending frequent messaging based on where we thought they were would increase their engagement as well. So we're always above that. Obviously, we wanted to do more, but we were tracking very well on that. It was working, but we got to always continue to fill that bucket because people are going to eventually fall off. But that was still a key aspect of our marketing was getting out there, getting the word out about the program in restaurant, online, paid, wherever it might be, to let people know that this is a great offer, a great program, and you should be part of it if you're visiting. So all those touch points to go, all those type of things to message that, so we continue to fill the bucket.
It's really interesting. And obviously, tracking engagement is a key component, right? I mean, you want more activity, you want more engagement, because that ultimately also leads to more sales and increased kind of LTV. When it comes to the people who have already joined and kind of been sitting there for a while, what worked the best to drive additional engagement? Was it new benefits? Was it more messaging? Was it the messaging being more personalized? Was it having more signage? Like what was the thing that kind of really moved the needle there?
Yeah. So having our almost lapsed group, was challenging because we've seen their history. We know what they've done. Something either have happened or they just have lost the communication. So we turned on other things. We knew their birthday, but we weren't offering a birthday offer program. So we saw their birthday. We created an automatic trigger for whether you've are signing up or you've already signed up and you haven't ever got a birthday reward. You get it 30 days before your birthday, and you've got automatic emails follow-ups if you haven't used that offer. So we turned that on. We turned on an anniversary sign up, offer as well. So hey, you signed up this time last year. Here's whatever it might be that would incentivize them to come in, a dish or a percent off. So there's other things we turn on based on knowing who they were, and continuing to target the message on based on who they were and the times of the year too. So you can also look back, like they did visit a lot in the winter. Maybe they're hosting and doing a lot of gatherings. So really maybe peppering them a little bit more with some messaging during that Q4 time period would be impactful. So still learning about who they were, and you're always learning. So you can
Yeah.
always try and test new things with either a small group or a large group, and just learn from that. Because at the end of the day, you're offering them something extra, so they're gonna appreciate it one way or another. So you really find out what works with them.
It sounds like the perfect kind of mix is it being personalized to whether it's their birthday, whether it's like holiday, wherever it kind of like lands the deepest with the customer on an individual basis, and then also maybe tying in a special offer. That to me, I know it works for me, and I know it works for a lot of the programs we run. Is that fair to say that type of reactivation of the existing members kind of works well?
Yeah, that, and then we realized, which we were doing a poor job of before, was the onboarding. Post sign up, they kind of signed up, and then they were just thrown into the natural population, right? Maybe they're new to the program. Maybe they're new to the whole brand as a general. So
Yeah.
we wanted to email them differently for the first 90 days than just throw them into standard Outback communication and free bloom here and there, because they might be just overwhelmed. Like, what did I actually sign up for? So what we implemented was a welcome sign up journey that would trigger it was first 7 days and 14, 21, and I think around 65. So about 4 touch points in those 90 days to really explain the brand that they signed up for. I went to Carrabba's and I signed up because it seemed like a nice program to sign up for, but that was my first time ever. So they're going to get an email about the founding, the founding members and the Johnny Carrabba and the history of the Italian food and the dishes that they made from the grandma and things like that as your first touch point. And then, talk about some of our core dishes and what they really excel in. And then talk about, the offerings that more kind of mass or, lasagna, things like that that people might know as well. But treat them differently a little bit the first anywhere from 3 weeks to 90 days to ease them into it. And again, re-emphasize the loyalty program. You don't want to just throw them in and they get standard communication about dishes and they forget what they need to do. Make it simple. Oh, you signed up, your third touch point. By the way, you have 50 points. If you get 150 more, you get $10 off. So re-emphasize the key points and what they need to do. So it's obvious on where they are and what they need to do to get the next offer. Because once they get the next offer, then it was a little bit easier to keep them growing into our higher tiers from 0 to 1 reward to 1 and beyond. It's a lot better to keep them because they knew the program, they were comfortable with it. But if they just sign up, they don't even get any messaging about the program for a long time based on what the brands are doing, they might forget about it and not be comfortable in what they need to do. So it was a great welcome journey that we implemented that also showed to increase early new signups to create their incrementality and create their frequency more.
I love that. I think that's such a great insight. And I was just thinking as you were talking, it's kind of like, don't just throw them in the highway like every other car, like give them an on-ramp, right? So once they get on the highway, they're kind of caught up to everyone else's kind of speed on the brand and the value proposition. I love that. So I think that's an absolute, gem of an insight, because you're right. Someone who joins your loyalty program, it may be their first time even interacting with you at all. So kind of getting them caught up on the story, getting them caught up on all the benefits and their value. That would, you can't keep giving that to the people that have been there for a while, but if you've just joined, it makes a ton of sense. In terms of the delivery method of those communications, did you find that email, SMS, push notifications, like, did one work better than the others? Were there, are all messages kind of the same?
Yeah. So being a large company that's gone through different iterations of technology, we wanted to bring that all together. So the goal was email, SMS, you get these messages one way or another through all those platforms. We were getting there, but we were able to send the same messages through SMS and email. We were finding SMS was higher in terms of offering, whatever it is they were supposed to get at that point. So we did find that for us, being an older brand, it was harder to do that cohesively, but we could do it. So it was something we saw of value is all the touch points that you can, deliver that omni message. We were finding SMS was very impactful because it was right there, something they wouldn't forget about. It's on your phone, and it's something you can see and spend time with. So they could opt out, but a lot of them were seeing that and using the offer as well.
Amazing. It's just such great insights. So just kind of like wrapping up on the stage of like the Outback and the BBI program in general, would you say kind of from where you were sitting, it was like a meaningful kind of like lever in the business, and it ended ultimately achieving the kind of the broader goals they wanted to have kind of completed?
Yeah, there's always evolution, though. Yes. So short answer, yeah. I mean, it was a huge talking piece. If you look, not many people are going to, but if you listen to our quarterly calls, it was a key piece that the CEO would talk about. It was continuing to drive our loyalty transactions and increase members. We wanted to get to millions and millions of active members. We had a huge bucket that were inactive, so there was a lot of legacy members that we had, an opportunity to go get. So that was kind of one goal, and then it was again filling the bucket. So it was very impactful. And then once you see that traction, and me working with 4 different brands, they see that one brand's doing something really well over here. Now this other brand wants to do it. So there's a lot of traction internally. This is working well and driving traffic and driving sales. Other people want to catch on, and what are they doing? How can we try it? So it was very impactful, but there's going to always be evolution too. You're going to continue to learn. Like we transition from visits to points. It's not always going to be right out the get-go, and it's not going to be right in 2 years. You're going to continue to evolve, come up with new experiences. I think was key for us was working with partners, with movies, different things outside the box, to continue that engagement and excitement, and why I want to continue to come in. So ultimately we wanted to get to a point where you could choose your award or choose your experience. And for us, it was going to take us a little longer to get there, but especially if you're started from scratch, there's easier things that you might be able to implement is, think of it should be frequency or monetary base. And then the types of offerings you want to offer, should it be, stock based on what they do, or should they have a little library that they could choose from once they get to a certain level? I would recommend that. And it's something that I think can be done just pretty simple. It's, if they hit a threshold, you've got this many points, you have 5 offers that you can choose from. And then you got another threshold, you have 2 really cool ones that you can do. So building that catalog, was ultimately the goal.
Love that. And I mean, gamification and just curation of experience and being able to choose this reward versus that reward. I mean, all that stuff drives engagement, and it's key. I mean, it's awesome. Hey, I got to ask you just before we wrap up on the Outback program piece of it, any interesting or fun anecdotes you can share? Like, is there somebody who like goes every day, or like any crazy prizes or anything that was like very unique?
Yeah, we were able to isolate quite a few people who would go almost every day, and it is what it is. It's what you can do with loyalty programs. You know what you need to spend to get whatever. So this person was getting an app, and a couple beers at the bar, but we found out by himself almost every day. So every other visit, he was getting another $5 or so. And great if it comes all the time. We were actually able to isolate that person, send them a unique message and like a gift bag, because they were coming a lot. Whether it was he was spending just enough to get that incentive, that's good for him. He learned, but you got to come a lot to do that as well. So that was one thing that also pushed us to points was, the way we had it with Visit, you had to spend X amount of dollars. The single diner for us was getting nothing. It was hard to get to, I think, $45 or so. So this guy being able to do that, and we know he was by himself, really helped us. Like, wow, we're leaving that set out too. So not only was it cool to see that he was doing it, and we were offering him something, it helped us create that business case to transition to points. So everyone, and you didn't have to go as a party of two or more to spend at the threshold. That was a helpful light bulb moment to say, we should really offer these people who are going a lot at the bar or whatever, just take out by themselves, to get some incentivized or some offers as well. So that was one cool thing that came up. Then there was just lots of really neat ideas from brands internally, myself, on how we could do it digitally. We really wanted to do it digitally. Outback, it is what it is. It's an older company, so we're trying to do as best as we can with the digital side, and looking into NFTs, looking into drinks that would be digital and they turn and they pour out. And we wanted to do, kind of break out of the mold, do something neat for us. So that was always something we were chasing. So always something we wanted to look at. I know they're probably working on something pretty cool right now, but something we always wanted to do is how we could take Outback and make it kind of cool again, and use that. So I know they've done quite a bit of things with that.
Cool. And I mean, a loyalty program is great to kind of bring that stuff together. Maybe if we just zoom out a little bit, maybe beyond Outback and just restaurants in general. And what do you think? Like, do you think restaurant loyalty is different than like the loyalty someone has towards an apparel brand, or like a makeup brand, or athletic brand, that type of thing? And what would be the similarities? It does feel that restaurants are a little bit different in the sense that you see less loyalty programs within restaurants, and especially when you see the smaller ones, the kind of the sit down, especially on the sit down side. But just curious to your thoughts just on restaurant loyalty in general.
Yeah, I think you're starting to see a lot, especially the quick serve restaurants. If you're familiar with Cava, they're a larger, like, Mediterranean, Chipotle style group. They just launched one. I go quite a bit. So I think it's flip side. I think when you visit a restaurant and you go a lot, which I was doing, I always wondered why they didn't have one. I was like, I'm a loyal member. I feel like they should recognize me a little bit. And then they did, and it was nice to track on the phone. I think for restaurants, a lot of it was to get people obviously they want them to dine, but also to be able to use our apps. It was harder for restaurants to use the apps than retail, obviously, because I'm just going to the restaurant. I don't really need to worry about that. But once you had the loyalty program, you could see your points. You could order online. Obviously, once we got them in the app, it was easier for them to order. They'd spend more. It was all good stuff. But it was hard for us to transition the standard customer into that without a loyalty program. There just wasn't a need as much. So I think that's why you're seeing a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think also Domino's does a great job. They come up with creative ways for you to order, and I'm also a little member of Domino's. But the one cool one I just saw was the emergency pizza. So if you it's just giving away a free pizza, and they do that all the time, but they marketed a way that sounded I needed that. If you order within their offer was, if you order in the next weekend, you'll get one free emergency pizza. And they had like a commercial of like a guy walking home with groceries and they explode everywhere or something. And he's like, boom, emergency pizza. So the creative ways they did it, I thought were great. So I think there's ways for restaurants and why they're doing it. So I think it is different, obviously, from an apparel brands or retail. But there's a lot. It's also a different monetary level. So you would expect something maybe a little bit different with if you're buying, hundreds of dollars worth of clothes. So, there should be some sort of recognition there too. You want them to come back, and if you're loyal to the brand and you wear the same clothes all the time, I want to continue that and feel good about it. And there's so many other cool ways of other products, I would think, that with retail that you could combine. It was hard. You think it'd be easy for restaurants, but it's not always easy. It's like movies, and like, what else can we really give away that would make sense? We tried apparel here and there, but it worked, but not as big as you'd think. So I always thought that would be fun on the retail side to just other, the people that use use the clothes. There's a lot of other accessories that make sense to partner with than I think retail or than restaurant.
I think also like the technology is probably somewhat to blame too, in terms of there hasn't really been like a very easy way to fire up a loyalty program. And there are some big restaurant brands, but there's a lot of
Yeah.
also a lot of small ones. So we hope to kind of help in that world. Um, just migrating to kind of the smaller brands. What would you say about a smaller brand? What would you say to a smaller brand who says, you know what, we're at the stage now where we're going to create a loyalty program. We don't have a huge marketing team, we don't have a huge kind of like operations team, but we want what Outback has, or we want what Sephora has, we want what Starbucks has, and hey, maybe the technology now kind of exists, but what would be some kind of like key pass alongs that you'd give that person?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, you can always test it out as well, but you know, I think that there's so many different aspects of a loyalty program that you can craft that just makes sense to your customer. And it doesn't have to. You don't have to have data scientists that come up with all these crazy things. That 9 different RFM segments, like that was a lot, right? And it did make sense. Sometimes it was like that's just too much. It's. I think if you know your business, there's probably 3 or 4 groups of customers in general that maybe act a little bit differently. And how can you come up with something that would incentivize most of them, and then also get, I'd say, 70 to 80% some sort of point, some sort of loyalty points, essentially, on each transaction. Like we found out that was a problem. Was 80% of the people that were going weren't getting anything, so they just fell off. Whether it's recognition, whether it's communication, it's points. It's something easy to implement, but I think those are the key parts of when you kind of start one is just some simple offers to start with that make sense, or simple rewards. And what is it? What's the threshold in terms of spend or points or visits that makes sense, that majority of the people would find some positives to, and some points that they would feel like, all right, this makes sense, and continue to learn about the brand. Because once they're in, they're spending a little bit more, then you continue that evolution of who they are and what they're doing. It's really neat to just see how it evolves. So it's really just starting with something pretty simple. It doesn't have to get too complex yet, and then you can just try out more things and kind of build on it.
Yeah, and I think the smaller brands also have some kind of inherent advantages too, right? I mean, if you don't have millions of customers, I mean, then you might have a better sense of what, like you have a better chance of not missing a full cohort of people, because you might have a better just like inclination on who's in your program and what would move them. And also, if the founder is the one running kind of like the company and really knows the customers really well, I mean, they're going to know,
Yeah.
right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
if I offer these 4 benefits, it's going to cover most of my customers. But it also sounds like, big companies, they don't do things just to do things, right? I mean, there's a clear ROI on having that loyalty program. And if a small brand, and the other thing too is like these big brands that don't have loyalty programs, they're all starting to get them. So it's not like there isn't a clear reason, and it is obviously valuable. So I really do think it's a worthwhile exercise. And to your point, I think that it's not just turn it on and there you go. There's going to be iteration. There's going to be some work to do, but there's obviously value to that. And yeah. Would you add anything to that, Rob?
Yeah, I think the value is. I think the value is also kind of depends on who you are in the business. Now, the founder will probably have 2 different lenses on this, but I think there are some people in larger corporations that will look at it and go, we just want to know what they're doing and who they are and how much they're buying. Like, they're looking at it this way, like financial, like this is going to make sense. They're going to come more, like, great. Then you might look at it a little bit different from the marketing side. Like, now we do know who they are. Now we can talk to a little more, get them to come more and be loyal to our company, loyal to the brand. So it's positives on both sides, but it's also how do you want to look at it? Obviously, majority of our loyalty customers were positive ROI. You get a little tricky there if you spend too much incentive, but there's 2 positive impacts from it that you can easily learn really quickly. So even if you're not offering a ton and you get a lot of people to come in, you might surprise you. You never know. You might think you might know them, but then you learn more about them when they sign up, their birthdays, how old they are, who are they actually buying for, and then preferences potentially. But you learn a lot, and that was the key data piece that we wanted to know. And obviously, the return on that too was also huge.
Amazing. I think I've learned so much from this, Rob. This has been so great, and thank you for sharing all this wisdom. For now that you're kind of no longer there, where can people find you? What are you up to now? Just kind of in wrapping here.
Yeah, so using my background from the restaurant and all industry side, I launched my own marketing agency, Launchpad Marketing. So launchpadmarketingteam.com. You can find me at Rob at launchpadmarketingteam.com. So I've been working with restaurants, smaller restaurant groups, smaller aesthetics, services groups. So understanding, you can transition the marketing and the touch points that we all talked about. You can transition that to a lot of different brands. So really knowing who they are, some of these triggers that you can implement that make sense, whether it's a loyalty or even an email sign up. Some people look at them as the same thing, but they're not. But also, kind of transition that. So working with a lot of groups on the creative side as well, from building those emails, the social, the photo shoots, graphic design. So using everything we've talked about and all those communication touch points and helping to educate and helping to build those creative pieces that you want to deliver these simple, beautiful messages, but it takes the right experience, the right eye to understand what the value and the value proposition of that email is to make it simple, and then you learn a little bit from the customer. So doing those things right now. If people need to reach out, that's where I am. But it's been quite a journey. I see a lot of groups that don't have loyalty programs, and I'm trying to push them towards as well because I think it's valuable. I think there's a lot of extra messaging you can do, and ultimately you can learn from them and target them a little bit more with special offers. So doing that right now, it's been a great 6 8 months, and I hope to continue it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Rob. Thank you so much. It's awesome.
Yeah, appreciate it.